Good evening. When Pat Carney learned today, she's the international trade minister who negotiated the 15% solution, that Kemp, the BC forestry minister, indicated all the money from that is not going into stumpage, going into reforestation and silviculture in British Columbia, she flipped her lid. She needn't have flipped her lid, because on January the 15th, Bill Van der Zam, when I asked him the specific question, made it perfectly clear that the 400 million BC is going to keep this side of the border on the tax, is not going to go into reforestation as such. Here's what I asked Premier Van der Zam on January, I think the 15th. Are you committed, Mr. Van der Zam, when you get your share of the 15% tax, to put that all into silviculture,
no,
reforestation, and job creation in the woods?
Well, I'm not committed to put it all in. It'll go into general revenue, and obviously the emphasis will be on reforestation, silviculture, job creation. But if, on the other hand, it's a choice between a liver transplant, a heart operation, or some very necessary thing in the health field or in the educational area, then this may take priority. That could well be, and therefore I can't commit all of the revenues to that one particular
priority. He made that perfectly clear. He's $1 billion short in his current operating debt for the year, and the money is going to go into general revenue. And Carney, however, when she heard the story that nothing was going to go, that the money was not going into forestry, also flipped her lid a little bit. Not only she, but Nelson Rees. But I want you to see what Carney said in the House of Commons earlier today.
Our government, if the opposition allows me the opportunity, our government provided for the opportunity of the government of British Columbia to use funds that would have gone to the U.S. Treasury to go into reforestation in BC. As the honourable member knows, that is a provincial jurisdiction. But as the honourable member knows, every British Columbia MP knows that our forests are a silvicultural slum. And if the government of BC does not act in a proper way to ensure that reforestation policies are carried out, when the federal government has provided the funds, the government of BC will have to answer to its voters.
Honourable member for Campbell. And you can watch for considerable confusion on this. But remember, Van der Zam made it perfectly clear he is not committed to put that money, as everybody once thought, into reforestation and allied practices in British Columbia. We'll have more on this topic tonight, but first, here's Ted with a rundown.
Do your children have problems reading? Are they labeled slow learners? The fault could be a learning disorder, and there's treatment available. Webster speaks with education specialist Simone Bibeau. But first, you haven't heard the last of the lumber war across the border. Dissension over the 15% tax on softwood lumber exports is still loudest from the lumber companies. Tonight with Webster, the man who objected strongest to Carney's tactics, Adam Zimmerman of Noranda, chairman of MacMillan Bloedel.
Mr. Zimmerman, what was the problem between you and Ms. Carney? I thought you had started out in total agreement, and finally you finished up more or less shouting at each other.
If you want to call it a problem, I think that the first problem was that we were not consulted at all on the initial foray into Washington around Labor Day. After that had been done, however, we had to recognize reality, so we supported her negotiating intentions because it had, in effect, been given away, but at that stage it was about half what eventually was given away.
All right. Feelings were so bad at one time that Carney on this program said to me about you the following item.
Don't forget, in the position of Adam Zimmerman, he sat in my office and asked me to seek a negotiated settlement. He never admits this, but Mike Apsey sat in my office and said the industry wants to seek a negotiated settlement. Mr. Zimmerman sat in my office to say he wanted a negotiated settlement. Mr. Zimmerman is on record as seeking an export tax. He flip-flopped in this issue at the last minute because he didn't like the 15% number. He agreed to a 10% number. He didn't like the 15% number. He's been attacking us ever since.
Do you plead guilty to flip-flopping, Mr. Zimmerman?
I would certainly agree with what she says, but what she doesn't say is the context in which it was done. The original context in which we were discussing, negotiating for some kind of temporary refundable export tax was that the Prime Minister and the President had a deal that there would be no protectionist harassment during the free trade talks. We felt that he could use that promise and get this irritant removed. And we felt that the only practical thing was some form of temporary refundable export tax. And Ms. Carney is right. In that context, yes, we did.
Fair enough. Now, you said at that time after the deal was made that the 15% solution could cost 20,000 jobs in the lumber industry in Canada. Do you still stand by that prophecy of doom and gloom when at the moment your stocks are climbing up, your shipments are going fine, and even though the dollar's gone up, you're doing very well, thank you very much, in the American export market?
I didn't say that. What I did say was that in the event, as will inevitably happen, when supply exceeds demand or demand falls off, that I thought there would be somewhere between 7,000 and 15,000 jobs that would be jeopardized. I never said that they would be lost. I said they would be jeopardized. And I think that when, times are buoyant now, there's no kidding about that, and this export tax has been so far absorbed by American buyers. However, what you have to remember is that it is a permanent shelter to our principal competition in our principal market of that amount of money. So that in itself is a disadvantage. When supply begins, when demand falls off, we will have a lot of jobs threatened, jeopardized.
In British Columbia?
All across Canada.
But I thought we were so efficient and such demand for our high-grade lumber in the eastern seaboard, I've read a lot of Wall Street Journal stuff on this, that we can still export at whatever price to those markets because our lumber and our cut is better.
I guess that what you have to say is it's so important that we have to do it. And if things become less buoyant, one thing that would happen is the currency would go the other way. It's been very strong lately, but it could go the other way. I think that we would just be able to take less from the industry to build and sustain the industry.
Is it not a fact, though, that you're very concerned about the 15%, because when it is translated into stumpage, it will increase your costs and your selling price in all your markets throughout the world, and not just in the United States?
Yes, I think the jury's out as to whether it is in fact going to be translated into stumpage. Certainly the industry wants to contain the damage to what it is said to be now.
But you heard what Carney said just now. Here we have a silviculture slum. The standard words in British Columbia are that we only get 150 million stumpage, but it costs us, the people of BC, $350 million to administer the provinces sympathetically, as was once said, for the benefit of the big forest companies. Do we have a silviculture slum, and have you been getting it easy from the governments in British Columbia on the revenues you have to pay them?
I think that silvicultural slum is a dramatic statement. I think that there are good areas and there are bad areas in the province. I think the best areas are probably the tree farm license areas, which are managed entirely by the companies. As to those numbers, that may be true just on stumpage alone, but if you consider that the forest industry generates probably over $1 billion in revenues for the public purse, the 100 or whatever they spend on stumpage isn't very much. And there is also a federal grant of, what, $300 million or something over 5 years that goes to the benefit of the forest.
Kempf today on reforestation seems to be a little bit, he's saying, we'll spend what money we have to spend when we know where we're going to have to spend it. Would you agree with him on that? And would you agree that the big companies have done an appallingly bad job of reforestation according to popular conception?
Well, I certainly think the popular view probably is blacker than the fact. Obviously, I only know a fair amount about 2 or 3 companies, and I think that their record is, while not perfect, is at least defensible. Remember that the province is the landlord. It's the same as if if your bathroom's leaking in a rented apartment, it's not your problem, it's the landlord's problem, and it's something the same. I point out to you that industry as being very much a leader in stating the case of the bad state of the forests wherever they were. It began in the Forest Congress in 1980 and another one last year. As a matter of fact, the first one, Jack Monroe and I were the chairman of it, and the record of that is pretty clear. So, you know, this is our future. Obviously, we care a whole lot about it.
Who should plant the trees? Should the government plant the trees on their own expense, and you should not plant the trees?
No, I think that the ideal situation is analogous to the tree farm licenses or indeed the freehold lands that are in some parts of the country. It's enlightened self-interest for any company to maximize the forest growth on the acreage it has. And I think it's clearly the record everywhere in the world that where private ownership has the responsibility, they live up to it. And it seems to be the case that it's easy here to say, well, I need to get some livers transplanted instead of plant trees, so that's what they do.
Well, that money is going to go into general revenue to help face the deficit. That's why Van der Zalm can't possibly guarantee it. Would you expect Van der Zalm to throw that $400 million into the forest sector?
No, I wouldn't, because in the first place, he couldn't spend it. You couldn't suddenly spend that amount of money. But what I would think was reasonable is to make an allocation out of it and say that's the first call on that is the forest. Mm-hmm. This subject has been studied to a fairly well. I mean, there have been royal commissions and private consultants and companies and God knows who. Really, we know what has to be done. And there has to be some road ahead just to start in on it and do it.
But on the countervail, or the 15% substitute for the countervail, is there not going to be considerable trouble and objections from you when they begin to translate that into the American satisfaction so that that 15% can be removed? Can it ever be removed, that 15%?
Well, you don't say never or always, but it looks, the way it's structured, is a very permanent I would call it a penalty on the industry. And I guess it'll sit there for quite a long time to come.
Is it a loss of sovereignty when we have to satisfy the Americans of what we do, say in the way of increased stumpage or whatnot, equals the 15%?
Well, I think it's pretty clearly that we are committed to maintaining this handicap for the Canadian forest industry. It's really it's just like that. It is a handicap. You know, it's an extra 4 pounds in a
So you're
horse's saddle.
pessimistic about the future in BC forests?
Well, no, I've got to say that the opportunities that are there are, you know, in a physical sense are great. What has to be done is all these competing forces have to be reconciled, and somehow there's a madness that sets in when the political imperative takes hold.
More with Adam Zimmerman, chairman of no, not chairman. You're chairman of Noranda?
Chairman of MacMillan Bloedel.
Chairman of MacMillan Bloedel. Big noise in Noranda after the break. Your calls too. No point in holding an inquest, but I can't resist a nag. Don't you in the industry were taking over the U.S. softwood market. You know, you went from a small percentage to 30-odd% of the market. Did you never think of holding back to kind of stem the tide of protectionism from the Northwest?
I think the answer is simply no, because there's no known mechanism for doing that.
No way to do that at all.
Well, you get really into some kind of a quota system, and you get into managed trade that while you might be able to do that with 3 or 4 companies like in the automotive industry with the thousands of sawmill or lumber companies, I can't imagine.
Did you answer my question about how fearful you are with the overall stumpage? If the stumpage rates are, as they will be, increased, will that put us in all your world markets in a much worse position? Because stumpage applies to everything. This tax only applies to American lumber going south.
You could postulate a whole lot of things on that one. Obviously, it's a further cost and therefore some kind of a disadvantage. I don't, you know, in a buoyant period you can pay it. In a bad period you can't pay anything.
What happens if the dollar goes to 80 cents?
Well, it hurts. I mean, that's a very considerable extra penalty.
5 cents up already at 75 cents.
That's right.
That won't affect your sales yet, will it?
It won't affect the sales, it'll affect the returns to us.
Go ahead, please.
Evening, gentlemen. Just a comment and a question to Mr. Zimmerman. It's the analogy you draw between the landlord and the tenant is very apt. It's awfully hard for any landlord to repair any damage in a property when the tenant pays no rent. Now, my question to you, Mr. Zimmerman, is don't you think that a lot of these problems could be solved if rather than the granting by fiat of the government to you people forest licenses, rather they should be open to competitive bidding as state?
That's a good point. Competitive bidding instead of forest management licenses.
I think that if you want to use the American system as an example, they do have a largely competitive bidding system, and in fact it doesn't work, and it gave rise to this problem because people overbid because they overestimated the market.
Whereas you had a good secured supply on the basis of stumpage, ipso facto, you were being subsidized into the U.S. market.
Yeah, and I just say one more thing, that I really think that, to the caller, that if the big, certainly companies that have a capital commitment must have some kind of permanence to their tenure if they obey certain rules. And if you don't think that the companies pay enough, or somebody does, well, that's your business. But I think that, in fact, if the companies were to have the tenure and it be their responsibility, that the land would be better tended than it is. And if you want to look at that, compare the tree farms with the not tree farms.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm wondering, I've been told that American-owned lumber companies up here do not have to pay the 15% tax.
No, I don't think that's true.
No, neither do I. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, and that is, if it wasn't for the feds, who worked out this 15% deal anyway, the provincial government wouldn't have the money to spend in general revenue. I think it's a gift. It would have gone down south in the first place. So I mean, they should put the forest in the first priority. And you know, Jack Kemp should be reforested himself. I mean, just a bunch of bloodsuckers. I mean, each time you hear it, it gets put on hold and on hold. So.
I didn't quite get the point, did you?
Well, I'm just saying that this $400 million they have in extra revenue is just like, it's like a gift.
Oh, it's manna from heaven for the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it would have gone down south if the feds didn't work this deal out with the Americans.
That's right. That's a good point in favor of the Carney deal.
Well, I think that has always been the good point in the deal. If you make the assumption that the case would have been lost and we would have been hit with 15% or more anyway. Remember that the industry had been at this thing for a long time. We had a whole lot of experience and a whole lot of information, and it was our very firm conviction that that 15% preliminary judgment would not have been sustained in the final determination. And that was really the root of the argument. But I do agree that if you make the assumption that willy-nilly we were going to be hit with 15% or better, it's certainly better to be in Canada. But I'll also tell you that there will come a time when that will be an unbearable burden for the industry when we get into the next down period, which will come as sure as tomorrow morning.
It won't come tomorrow morning.
It won't come tomorrow morning.
Go ahead, please. Hello.
Mr. Zimmerman, is this me?
That's you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Webster. I would like to commend Mr. Zimmerman. I'm not involved with lumber, but I think that he's a very astute businessman. He makes a lot of sense. I've read some of his statements that he made out of Toronto, and I think he makes an excellent chairman for MacMillan Bloedel. It's unfortunate that he's not resident in Vancouver, because I think we could use people like him. I think it's very difficult for him to deal with the bureaucracy in Ottawa and the government.
Well, that's enough praise. What's your point?
Well, the point is that I think that he's being placed in a very difficult position, and I think that more people, rather than taking a shot at him, should give him a pat on the back. I think he's a nice guy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We never overdo these calls. Go ahead from Chilliwack.
Yeah, how you doing, Jack?
No bad.
The reason I call, I'm presently employed by the forestry, and I was living on welfare, and they have programs that are set up to get you off the welfare system. And anyways, I just recently got going at this job about 2 weeks ago, and today they were talking that if they didn't get the funding, that the job that I'm doing will only last for 6 weeks, and then I'll be back on welfare again. That's basically what's going to happen. I was just wondering that if this funding isn't given to the forestry, if it's going to put my job in jeopardy.
What kind of job are you doing?
Slashing and burning, tree spacing, things along that line.
Well, I think you make a very good point, because this deal, so-called, has been sold on the fact, in part, that people like you are going to benefit from it. And so, indeed, as Ms. Carney said in the early clip, the government will have to answer to the people for whatever they decide to do with the money. And you would be one of the voices.
Go ahead, please, from Victoria.
Yes, Mr. Zimmerman, earlier you said that it was good that we negotiated a deal on the softwood lumber and the export tax staying in Canada. I don't think it's wrong that our Forest Minister Kemp isn't going to put any more into reforestation. That's money that wouldn't have been there, period. And you said yourself that the government couldn't spend $400 million. So what do you suggest Mr. Kemp do? He's taking a lot of flack for what he said today.
Well, I think I said that earlier, that I think, I mean, it is acknowledged that there is a lot of catching up to do in the forests in British Columbia and elsewhere in Canada. And I think that the government is almost honor-bound to take some meaningful amount out of this windfall revenue and put it in the forest.
Yeah.
For a whole lot of reasons, but you're right that it was money they weren't going to have otherwise.
Sure. I mean, there's so many things that need to be done in the forest industry, but elsewhere, too, in the province, we have a massive deficit that shouldn't be there.
Well, that's what it's going
I know
for.
several people in the forest industry. They're all working. The only people that aren't still working in the forest industry are the people who lost their jobs in the recession. Everybody else, if they really tried, has found another job.
Still found a job. Would you think it's at all possible that the 35% on the shakes and shingles could be transferred to 15%?
How do you mean?
This side of the border? Well, they put 35% on shakes and shingles.
It's an interesting thought. Well, they have a reducing scale on that tax, and I think it goes down to something like 15%.
Over a period of 5 years. Take a final call. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Mr. Zimmerman. I'm terribly confused on this question of profits of your company and so on. Would you like to explain to me why a New Zealand company is coming in here and picking up 49% of one of your competitors? In the face of all this, they expect to make money? I think you cried the blues a lot. You got me totally confused as to the fact you might go broke. How come New Zealand company can come in here and, in the face of all this, and run a competition against you? I'll wait for your answer.
I didn't say that we were going to go broke. I said that it's a big penalty on the lumber industry. Clearly, it is a much greater penalty on those people who are in lumber solely, and less of a penalty on those who have integrated operations. The deal you talk about was for integrated operations, and those businesses are certainly going to be profitable in the foreseeable future.
It shows that Fletcher Challenge has considerable faith in the forest tenures and the future of British Columbia, doesn't it? $500 million.
You might say they may have been making more money in New Zealand than we've been making in Canada, and they can afford the money to go out and buy
You're
it.
doing very well in pulp. Pulp's been fantastic, hasn't it?
I'm not making any complaint about the forest industry right now. As you know, I felt that this deal was not appropriate, and it is an added burden that someday is going to hurt.
My thanks to Adam Zimmerman, chairman of MacMillan Bloedel. And I'll be back after the break. I'm going to do some eye exercises on the vision clip.
Jack's going to do some eye exercises on the vision clip.
Is that
Is there a
right?
monitor? I talk over that clip.
Why can't we have the monitor over here quickly? We're sorry, we're in a bit of a mess today.
No problem.
Right off the top, Jack, just call for it. It's on an instant.
What's on an instant?
Okay. We're going to get into some creativity, also the creative IQ, as well as the skill.
Simone Bibeau is from Phoenix, Arizona, and she's an educational specialist in the area of children. The last time we were together, Simone, we talked about dyslexia, did we not?
Yes, we certainly did.
And tonight we're going to talk about boosting your child's IQ.
Right, because what we're going to talk about is the fact instead of concentrating on remediating, let's start focusing on preventing the problems and giving every child the best opportunity, starting when they're real young.
That's sacrilege, preventing the problems. You know perfectly well when a child goes to school that sometime along the road, teacher will say, I'm worried about your child. It may be dyslexic. It has a problem. Are you suggesting to me that it's the time in school that creates the problem?
Very often it is. And it usually happens around 8 or 9 years old. That's when the teacher usually calls and says, you know, I think Johnny's slipping and he's starting to have problems, and maybe we should test him to see if he has some learning disabilities.
Now, we're going to see a little film clip here which is something to do with eye exercises, and there it is there.
What we're looking at here, we're watching this little boy's eyes. This is one aspect of our perception skills. Now watch how much trouble he has as he's following the object. And he'll start squinting. He's trying to move his head. Look at now how they jerk back there, and they're jerking again to the center. What we have is a midline in every person's body. Now, can you imagine this child trying to read? It would be a disaster. Yet this child is perfectly normal. And the vision, the eye muscles need to be exercised. The National Optometric Society has determined that at least 60% of learning problems can be attributed just to the vision.
Well, now, are you telling me that if I had tiny children, I should be giving them eye exercises?
Absolutely. We should do it with adults. Why don't we do it with you? Why don't we try this on you and see how your eyes are, Jack?
Can we do it now?
Sure.
Okay, try it on me. What do I do?
Okay, what we would do, now you can't move your head. You have to keep your head still.
Can't move my head, yes,
That's
yes,
right.
yes, okay.
And you're going to follow the marker as I move it across from left to right. And we're going to watch Jack's eyes, and we're going to see if they move smoothly rather than the jerkiness. So you have to look at the marker.
Well, can I
and
move
follow.
my head?
No, you can't move
Let's
your head.
start
Just
again.
have,
Let's start
okay.
again.
You
Okay.
just move your eyes.
Okay,
You can't
I'll
move
just
your
move my
head.
eyes. Okay.
Okay. Now with a child, we'd have to hold their head. Now I hope you aren't going to try and cheat on us here. Oh, you're trying to move your head now.
Well, I can do it without moving my eyes. I can see it without moving my eyes.
Well, okay, we'd have to maybe be in closer. But your eyes are to follow.
Are my eyes following?
Yes, they were. There was a little jerk in there, though. A little bit of movement. This is the self-test, I see. Now, your eyes are supposed to follow that, Jack. I think we have a problem.
That's not easy. Then do it again. Come on, let's do it
Okay,
again.
we're going to get this right.
Right.
Maybe we should try an easier exercise,
No,
Jack.
no,
Okay, now you just follow the marker. This is what a parent could do with their child to see if their eyes are moving smoothly. We move it from left to right. Now you're trying to move your head. You've got to keep that head real still. And you can't let it jerk back to the center like that. See, if you did that, you might miss a word and they might say that you were dyslexic.
That's not that easy a test, that one, is it?
No, it
Okay.
isn't, but it's also an excellent exercise. You know, there are a lot of adults that have this problem, and they have never understood why they get headaches when they read and they have all problems. But now, let's watch a little child. Let's figure if he's having trouble with the eyes, like we saw in the video clip, and he figures out how he's going to get around this. He's going to keep his head still. So he's going to go like this. Pretty soon the whole body starts going, and you know what? This child is hyperactive, can't sit still in his seat. Think we better get him tested. You know, he's really immature. Maybe we'll hold him back a year.
Well, let's carry on from the eye test, but I can see the point. You're saying that, but can adults do this kind of things themselves, or must they bring in professionals?
Oh, they can definitely do these types of exercises themselves. But what we really want to do is get these parents doing it with their children. See, the perception skills, which is the foundation for all learning. Vision is just one aspect of it. The ability to move the eyes, not the 20/20, but the ability to move the eyes. Then we have comprehension, we have motor skills, we have auditory skills. We'll work on that afterwards, Jack.
Auditory skills.
The auditory. Children today aren't being taught to memorize anything. They don't have to learn anything. My fourth graders, when they came in to learn the multiplication tables, was the first time they'd had to memorize anything in their lives, and they were lost.
But I thought that was bad to go through things by rote, making children memorize things.
And that's why we threw it out. We're not going to make these children do this
Was that
anymore.
a bad move to throw it out?
Very definitely.
In
We
other words,
need to teach this.
memorizing items in school is good for the children's intellectual development.
It is. Have them learn little stories, little poems, songs. It's a marvelous way to, it's called mental gymnastics. We need to train our brains, and we need to start when the child is very young, because that is when we can make the most impression on that mind. We can raise IQs up to 20 to 40 points. You know,
You sell a kit for this, don't you?
oh, definitely, yes.
What else does it do? Okay, but you're giving us some good comment. What about dyslexia? Is it any easier now to spot dyslexia than it used to be? If you can tell me what dyslexia is.
Dyslexia is a wonderful term used by the educational psychologists to say, we have a problem here. The child isn't learning to read well, and we aren't really sure what it is, so we'll give it this wonderful title. And it's a wonderful way that we get around parents and we don't really have to tell them what's going on. Rather than saying this child has a left-right problem, or is having trouble with the vision, with the visual motor skills, or maybe he has an auditory memory problem.
In other words, you can see it, but you can't remember what it was.
Very definitely. You know, well, in auditory memory, I had a situation with one little boy. He was supposed to be tested because the typical 8 or 9 years old, he started having problems in school. Also typical, he was a perfect student up until then. Now he wasn't getting his work completed. He was being totally obnoxious in the classroom, was totally non-cooperative, and the same at home. Went in and started watching him and started working with some of the skills, found his auditory memory was real bad. The teacher was up there listing maybe 5, 6, 7 items for the child to do for all the class. Then she'd take her small group off for reading. He only remembered 2 or 3. This was his problem. He wasn't learning disabled. He didn't have anything wrong with his brain. He just hadn't been taught to remember what he was told. Once we started working with his auditory memory, he was right back up to the top of the class.
Auditory memory is speaking it and saying it, is it?
It's remembering what you hear.
Remembering what you hear. You say that 95% of a child's IQ is developed before the age of 13?
Yes. That's why we can't wait. We have to get parents involved. They have to start working with the young children. 75% is developed before the age of 7 or 8.
Oh, you're good. More tests and questions from viewers after the break.
Looking ahead.
Put an X in each box. And then draw a line through the...
To do these, he has to put X's.
Right, and then we're going to do the follow-up, the second activity to that.
Let me get this right
We'll do
now.
the advanced one.
Put an X in each box.
Can you do it cheating it a bit, the camera too?
I put an X in each box
And then you have to follow the little footprints back.
to the box.
Right.
And then come out of this one, through this one, and round there, and round there, and round there. Yeah, I can do it.
As much as you can to take.
You
camera
hand,
two.
which camera?
Camera 2 here.
You hand it to me. and
Okay.
I'll do it.
Yep.
And have you got to do this in one continuous thing?
No, you just put an X in each box and then go on. You have to do the whole page. Well, we don't
Yeah.
have to do the whole page,
Yeah,
but we
but
can.
you've got to follow it right through continuously.
Right.
Through the boxes.
That's right.
Top-notch tracks until she finds her pie.
See, we get a reward.
What's the reward?
The pie.
Oh, I see. I'm not very bright tonight, Simone. Jesus Christ. When were you last up here? About 2, 3 years
Yeah,
ago?
yeah, you've hurt yourself.
I just fell and bashed my kneecap. It'll be all right. I'm there too. Simone Bibeau from Arizona, of all places, who's telling us how to increase your child's IQ and to watch and spot and perhaps do something in the home about learning disabilities.
That's right. The parents, these are the people I'm challenging to get very involved. They have these wonderful dreams for their children. Oh, I want my child to be so great. Well, they need to take some action on that and do something about it.
Take away the television.
That would help a little bit. But you know what? We can turn television into something good. if we do the right types of skills, and we can talk about that when we get into some creative things.
All right.
But we have a motor skill here for you.
A motor skill.
That's right. Now, see, we assume that children have all of these skills before they start to read, and we don't bother teaching it. One is how to track a page, how to follow it from left to right, top to bottom. So we're going to start you on the easier one, and you have to go through the little squares.
Put an X in each box. Can anybody see that? Oh, yeah, kind of. And draw a line through top-notch tracks. X in each box. Do I have to put? I'll do 2 lines.
Okay. Now, wait a minute. You didn't follow. Oh, now, Jack, you're supposed to put an X, and then you have to
and then
follow the tracks.
Okay.
Follow the tracks back.
And now a little top-notch
Now draw the
footsteps.
line. There
I
you
get
go.
it.
You
Oh,
see
I
what we're
got it
doing?
here, yes.
We're teaching how to follow the page
Then I'll
correctly.
go down to there, and I'll go through there, and I'll put X's everywhere else.
Excellent. See, now we can give you a real good score on that.
And I reached the pie.
You've gotten the reward. That's superb. But you know what's
How old
interesting?
should a child be when they do that?
We can start children in their 3s, the brighter children who are able to handle a marker. But anywhere 3s, 4s, in that vicinity, we can get started. Now we have the advanced one. See, this is where we're actually teaching them how to do it. Now this is where we're going to really
Motor
find
skills all
out.
the way through.
Amazing how
This
many
is a number
children.
one.
That's right. Now what we're going to do here, it's the same type of thing to find out whether the child knows how to track the page.
Starting at the left, track each row and circle each number 1 to 10, being sure they are in the proper numerical order.
And we've even given you the first 2 to get you started.
And I'm not allowed to have any movement on my head.
Well, no, you can move your head on this one. That's okay.
Okay.
But you start out circling the 1.
There's a 1,
And
there's
then the
a
2.
2, there's a 3, there's a 4, there's a 5, there's a 6, there's a 2 6s.
Well, just find the first
There's
one
7,
that you come to.
there's an 8, there's a 9, there's a 10. See?
Okay, let's see.
Do you see it? I did it.
That's good. Excellent.
Top
now,
of the
see,
class.
this would tell us that the child knew how to track a page. Now, we know that you can read a page. You know the direction to go. Jack, it is scary, the number of children that I have discovered, that I have worked with, that couldn't track a page, and then they could never figure out why the child couldn't read.
We better get some phone calls. Give me another, demonstrate another simple one.
Okay, let's see. Let's take a look. Another thing, we wanted the child to put something at the top left hand of the page. We need to teach them how to orient themselves on a page. So that's what this would be doing, is dealing with left,
What
right.
is under, what is right, what is left, what is on, and what is over? That's under, that's right, that's left, that's on, that's over.
That's right, exactly. But these are such...
Why do you do this evangelizing for IQs?
Because we have millions of children in special education at this time.
You're still teaching.
No, I've left the classroom to speak to the parents, because the parents can make the difference. The parents really care. They want to get involved with their kids. They want to do what's right for them. And what isn't the best thing, teaching your child the ABCs, that's nice, but that isn't going to really increase their IQ. It's not real learning.
What about all this? Remember there was a great vogue a few years back where you hammered all this knowledge at a little baby and the baby was supposed to learn everything?
Right.
Is that a lot of nonsense?
The problem with it is showing the child words or showing the child letters. Maybe some children will be able to memorize those, but that's all that it is. It's not really developing the actual intelligence.
Let's try some calls. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening, Jack.
Good evening.
I have a 14-month-old little girl, and I was wondering if there was anything that I could start to do to help her.
Definitely. That's wonderful. The younger, the better. One of the things to remember with real young children is that, remember in the videotape that we saw the child's eyes having a lot of problems moving across what we call the center line. Imagine a line right down the middle of that child's body and another one across. Taking the right arm, move it over to the left leg. Get them crossing these midlines, getting them throwing balls, getting them moving, the motor activities, essential for developing the whole system of that child.
Tossing a big soft ball at them to catch.
Exactly.
Do
It's
that
wonderful.
with my grandchildren all the time.
Well, then they should do very well. But those are just a few of the things. But being aware of this midline, that's very important.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask your guest whether she knows anything about educational kinesiology, which is a kind of program that is being adopted by some schools to deal with dyslexia and special ed problems.
I'm not familiar with that one specifically. I assume that they're getting involved in a lot of the motor activities?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's definitely excellent. Motor is one of the 4 base areas for all perceptual learning. But again, here we're dealing with remediation rather than prevention. It's great, and so many of the children that I worked with in the remediation area, we did many different motor activities. But just even taking the kids out and having them play ball, getting them involved in sports is excellent for that. It sounds like it most likely is definitely in the right direction, but I'd sure like to see those same skills being applied to the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds.
Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, not that one. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening, Jack. Just listening to your show there, and you seem to be describing my son. He's 9 now, and he is struggling in school. And I was wondering exactly what can be done now to help him that he is struggling, and how we can help him, not so much the school. And is this a school problem, or should this be handled at home? I'll hang up and wait for your answer.
I think that at home you're going to see a lot of results. And just stay with us. We're going to be showing you a lot of different activities that you can be doing.
And you're doing a thing
I'm doing
here.
a seminar.
Put it up, the seminar. Put it up now. Can we?
And this is exactly why I do these seminars, is because the parents need the education to know what to do with their children at home. And I would just about bet, like he said, it describes his son. We have so many parents like this.
Child's IQ seminar, Tuesday, Feb 10, 7 p.m., Skyline Hotel. There's a number there, 682-3444. We'll show that again before the end. Now we'll take a break. Simone Bibeau from Arizona. Go ahead from Trail.
Hi, Jack, and welcome to your guest, and I am very pleased to see that somebody is speaking out about education. And as an educator for over 30 years, I have one question to ask her. Is that she says that she can raise the IQ from 20 to, or she can't, but or whatever, 20 to 40 points. Which tests does she use? And I have, like I said, I've been in the business for a long time, and the thing is that you can give a child a Binet or a Gates-McGinty test, and you can read it to them, and they can score 40 points above.
Okay, a bit complicated. Do you actually use IQ tests for your kids?
Yes, we've also used the Binet and the WISC. Now, one of the things also that the National IQ Institute and a number of the universities doing a lot of research. Now, down in Arizona, we've done an awful lot of research on it, but there have been 40 to 50 years worth of research on this showing that it is possible. The standard, it's very easy to raise a child's IQ easily up to about 20 points. And again, it's by giving them the perceptual skills. Obviously, you've given these types of tests. You're very aware that that's what so much of it is composed of, versus the idea of can a child read words or can they do the alphabet. So these are the types of skills we're trying to encourage parents and people to understand that this is the whole concept of learning.
Good. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a question for your guest. Will any of this work for adults?
Some of it will. Now, you must realize that it's a lot tougher for adults, and the biggest problem is because we sometimes don't want to really commit ourselves to doing the work. Now, I have invariably had people in the audiences that they'll find out, discover their vision problems or suddenly understand their auditory problems. They can act on it. They could do these types of exercises, but the question is, are they willing to dedicate themselves to doing it? Young children, on the other hand, are so eager to learn. They can hardly wait to spend the time doing the activities and doing the work. They love it.
By the way, you've got this IQ booster kit for children.
Right.
Which is sold by Media Insights. Where is that?
Media Insights, it's a school supply. They do catalogs out to parents.
In Vancouver?
Right here in Vancouver. And they've been so supportive. They've really helped with putting on this seminar.
Good. And that would be helpful. Eh?
Very definitely. We also have a creative IQ. See, we also have to deal with raising our creativity. It isn't just the skill aspect. That's one very powerful portion of it. But we also need to encourage the creative IQ.
Yeah. Maybe we can have time to talk about that in a minute. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I'm a grandmother, and I live in Delta, and I have done for 30 years. and I'm going through this schooling process with my grandchildren again. And that guest you have on tonight is absolutely my type of teacher. I couldn't agree more with her in her methods, because that's the way I was trained, to memorize and et cetera, exactly what you're saying. I wish we had a province full of teachers like her.
Thank you.
You know, grandmothers are such great supporters, grandmothers and grandfathers.
Yes, yes,
Because they're willing to spend some time and some energy with those grandchildren, and they're fantastic.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a son in grade 8 who has gone through Children's Hospital, been diagnosed as having mild dyslexia, but my concern is in grade 6 he did very, very poor, and that was a lot to do with the whole atmosphere of the classroom. He was transferred schools. He was held back, went into grade 7 a year later, and did extremely well. He was a B average. Now he's gone on to grade 8, and he's fallen right back again. And in my approaching the teachers and telling him I'm going to get a tutor and all these types of things, only got his back up towards me. And I'm just wondering, should I put this to him having a problem or him just being lazy?
Oh, please don't put it to him being lazy. So often we find that there's like maybe one piece that's missing. One experience that I had at one of the seminars, a mother was, we were talking about her son. He was a sophomore in high school. He'd been in special education since 2nd grade. Now, if you were watching earlier, the tracking page that Jack did for us, the 2 different pages, we tried that out with her son, just a little bit more advanced level of it, and found that he could not track a page. It had never been taught to him. And they couldn't understand why he had trouble reading some of the more difficult reading pages. We also found out that he had a problem with the eye movement.
Do you blame the schools for this?
I do a lot. I really do.
I personally blame the school system. He never had a very good start because he had several poor teachers. But